Hello, my name is Kristan Weisdack. I am the CEO and founder of BehaviorWorx of Southwestern PA, and our subject matter expert that's joining us this evening is Elizabeth Joy Shaffer. You're normally living in Estonia, but she's here in Pittsburgh visiting for a few weeks. It's just a pleasure. We had talked probably a couple months ago about your expertise, and some of what we do aligns with one another. And so, Elizabeth, you've been doing this for quite some time. You're a doctor of occupational therapy. You're a speaker, a published author. You have the Empowered Parent, and then you're the founder of Therapeutic Innovations International. There's so much on your profile to read through. It was just really fantastic. But you've had advanced training in sensory integration with feeding, but specifically working with children with special needs, with autism, ADHD, helping parents and professionals. And specifically today, I was going to talk to you about some of the resources that you shared. You had a talk you just gave at Mind Valley University. Is changing the parenting paradigm. So if you could start in explaining to our audience a little about yourself, how you came to be in this field, and then share your resources with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. And I'm very excited because we really do align with the holistic approaches, because our kids are so many layers, and we're human beings with so many different aspects to our lives, and that a lot of times is not being addressed with our typical healthcare. So thank you for allowing me to come on and join. So yeah, a little bit about myself. So I'm from Pittsburgh, and I graduated OT school out of University of Pittsburgh back in 2001. And I always loved working with kids, especially kids that were considered on the spectrum or ADHD. And just because I was just drawn to them, because I myself am not neurotypical, so I understood them on that level. And then I had two of my own. And so I understood another side, not only working with children, but then also raising them. And when I had two of my own, I realized some of the challenges that we face as parents, and how some of those challenges can compromise how we're showing up for our kids and our own health, our kids' health. And, as a therapist, I was so used to just working with the child and treating the child, helping the child to develop and learn and grow. And I would share some of these strategies with parents, but there was never, I felt there was something more needed for parents, because when I was a parent, I was so glad I had the resources I did as a therapist, where a lot of these parents, they don't have that background. And my big thing was stress, because a lot of what I do as a therapist is helping my kids to self-regulate, because when we're stressed, we can't use that frontal lobe. We are back here in fight or flight, and we're just trying to hold on. And all those behaviors that get us in trouble, they are so much more pronounced when we are stressed. We just don't. All adults too. When you're stressed, you don't make good decisions, and it takes the energy when you're stressed. It's not good. And so I kind of went on this other alternative road of how do we help our kids to be less stressed? Because I noticed even with my own child, when our kids are stressed or overwhelmed, they're not able to learn. They're not able to take information. They're not able to behave in the way they want to. I think all kids want to do their best, but their nervous system's just overloaded. And so I went down this path of just really working on de-stress. And so, just through sensory integration and some other paths. But then I noticed parents, as I was one of them, really were under a lot of stress. And my stress was feeding into my son's stress, and vice versa. His stress was feeding into my stress. And the two of us, I'm like, oh, this is just not a good channel, and so I really started to work on my own stress and well-being. And when I started to work on my own health and well-being, it spilled over to my kids, because I learned strategies that I could do, that one, I could teach them, but when I'm happier, they're happier. You know, we're doing things. I can handle problems when they have a meltdown. And if I actually am in a place where I'm feeling good, I can handle that meltdown a lot better than when I'm just exhausted and overwhelmed. And so I kind of made a shift a couple of years back to where I wanted to support parents more, because we're in the trenches every day. And there are things that I was doing that I know a lot of other parents out there do that we don't even realize, that kind of sometimes makes things harder. It's hard enough. But there are some things that when we can kind of look at deeper layers and look at what we're doing and be more aware of certain things, we can make some shifts that, you know, really make that difference. So mentally, emotionally, and physically, we're kind of showing up to our kids in a different state of being. And that's really my focus now.
Yeah, and I love that, because it's a lot of what we share. And it's, if I hear correctly, it's more along those lines of co-regulation. And
Yes.
like, once you get your body calm, then you're able to help your children calm. And this is a great idea, because I mean, it spills over into when we're working with adults with autism, when we're teaching them their own strategies, the strategies that I've used myself. And some of them can be so simple, but the one thing that strikes me is sometimes we do these things intuitively and we don't even know that we're doing them to help us calm down. And so it just aligns perfectly with what we're doing. So if then you could talk to us about what are some of the highlights of that talk you gave at the Mind Valley Institute?
Yeah. So the highlight, you know, the goal was, you know, changing the parenting paradigm. You know, I think as parents, we picked up some not so good traits over the past 10, 20 years, just in our society, of the expectations of the doing, and not being. And so really the talk, I kind of focused on three main things to help parents, because, you know, it's not always easy. And how can we make parenting easier and more enjoyable and change some of this paradigm that maybe we've adopted from society's expectations, our own, to where it's more fun, you know, and enjoyable. and, you know, because that was one of the things at one point I stopped and I realized what was coming out of my mouth. And it was always do this, do that, or we were going to this therapy and doing that. Like, we were never having fun. And I'm like, I would hate to be around me when I realized everything, it was always do this, do that, do this, do that. And so when I became self-aware of how I was showing up, and I realized that's not how I want to show up, it was just so automatic. I mean, we were just, you know, from day, it's just react here, this. And that was kind of the first thing we start with, is awareness. Because a lot of times we are so automatic and used to a certain routine that we never step back and look, is that really the best way to approach something? Like my son, you know, he would forget something and I'd be right there. All right, got to drive because we don't want to have a meltdown. And I was so, you know, some of the things when I actually step back and I'm like, you know what, if I approach it this way, it'll be a little bit easier. So that was one of the things. Awareness was one of the biggest foundations where we start, and that restore. Because I hear this so much, that parents, by the end of the day, we're exhausted. We are so depleted. And that is usually when we lose it, is at the end of the day, when we're trying to get our kids down and they are just not regulated enough to calm down. We need them to sleep because we have no more energy. And so that first piece of restore is, we cannot be giving from an empty bucket. And so many of us are, because that's the normal way of being, but it needs to change. We need to give from our overflow, not from that little reserve that we have left. And so that's really the start of it, is how can we look at where our energy is draining? And so where throughout the day where we don't we can kind of patch those holes. Like kind of, that's how I put it. So if we have that bucket, it's filled in the morning. So we want to start in the morning by filling it. And I tell every parent, if you can take 10 minutes before you come out that door of your bedroom for you, whether it's a 5-minute YouTube workout or whatever it is, for me, it's a yoga. Some mornings I need to do something. I'm old school. I like Denise Austin, and I don't know. I just, that 5-minute daily workout does it for me. But if you can do that one thing that starts the day off for you before you step in to take care of everyone else, it really makes a difference. Because I will tell you, my tolerance and patience is so different. Those moments when I'm out of bed straight into mom hat and going versus that 10 minutes that I took for myself. And then I come and take care of the kids. So that's one is, when you're starting, how do you fill the bucket? And then looking at those energy drains. And so I'll give you the one big one. There's a lot of different ones that we could go over, but the big one was being mindful of our thoughts. Because so often, I had done a survey with parents not too long ago, and I asked, what's your number one thought you have in a day? And people were sharing their thoughts. And this was with an autism group. And one of them was like worrying about my child, how they will be when they grow up. And the child's 5. And so, when our mind is in the future worrying, it takes us away from being in the present now, doing what we can now for our kids. And so that energy wasted of worrying about the future, where you have no control now. We only have control of what's here and now. So it's looking at those energy drains of where our mind is. Are we worrying about something in the future? And a lot of times I tell parents, you can worry about how your child is when they're going to be an adult, but remember, they're going to be a completely different version now. Where my son is now compared to where he was when he was 5, completely different. And I could have never imagined this version that he is now back then, never. But that's why we don't want to waste that time worrying and being in the future. We want to be in the here and now. So that's one of the key things is being mindful of the thoughts. Mm-hmm.
Resonate with that deeply, because I think in the morning after you wake up, or even when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, sometimes it's a matter of your thoughts are abstract. There's nothing concrete and tangible about them that you can. It's not like writing things down, or it's not like talking to a person. You haven't like physically manifested them in any form, so you can't really do anything about them. So like getting out of your mind and into your body is kind of the conversation I've been having a lot. And that's exactly it. It's a matter of how can you really be present with yourself, and then it helps you be present with your children. So I love that.
Yeah. And there's several different strategies we can do with those thoughts. Like sometimes with worries, and sometimes a worry is a legit thing, right? Like, oh, I'm worried, did I leave my curling iron on at home, right? So it may be, sometimes those worries are, our intuition saying, hey, but sometimes they're just a repeated thought that we're so used to having that it continues to go. And that's not always helpful. I call it the problem loop, to where we're worrying about the problem, and we're going in a loop and we can't get out to the solving part, because all we're doing is focusing on the problem. We're not thinking what can we do about this? We're just focusing on the issue.
And really to that like you talked about, being in that fight and flight ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're like scanning that problem to say, what happened last time? How did we solve it? Let's scan for any other problems. Let's go over it again and again, just to make sure that we're going to be safe. And it's not in the problem solving phase. It's not in that rest and digest. So you're still caught up in that sympathetic engagement, and you're stuck. I love that. Yes.
Yeah. And so that's the awareness, right? We're aware that our minds are doing this. And that was one of the things too, the awareness with our thoughts. So it's not only like being in the here and now in those worries, but it's also what we're thinking. There was early on, my son, we had a case worker that we were working with, and she was very difficult. when I saw that email came from her, I'm like, oh, here we go. Okay. You know, it was hard because there was some tension and challenges of getting services. And I'm sure all these parents, you know, even schools and, you know, right, we all are in these challenging moments with people where, you know, we're trying our best to get something for our kids. And sometimes there are roadblocks from people. And well, her and I, she was definitely one of these people that made things a little bit harder in our lives. But I remember I used to get so upset with her, and I would read an email and get so mad at the response and the things that they're requiring. And it really got me so upset. And I remember it was a Friday and I got an email, and then I was thinking about it all during dinner, all at night, all over the weekend. What am I going to write? What am I going to say back? Like, it was just on my mind. I was so consumed with the emotions that I had in this issue. And then I realized, oh my God, all this energy I was giving her, and this problem took me away from everything over the weekend, because mentally and here I was worrying and angry, and I couldn't even enjoy the kids. And because I was thinking of this. And then I remember in the shower, I was thinking about this. I'm like, no, she does not belong in the shower with me. This is my space, you know, no. And even in bed, I started to realize, no, people cannot, no, she does not belong in my bed. And when I started to think of it this way, of, you know, my mind, you know, being more protective of where my mind was going and the energy and how long I was spending on certain problems and issues, when I realized that and started to refrain, and I would only open an email when I had a time to look at it in a good frame of mind and respond. When I realized how much energy I was losing in situations like this, it helped me to reapproach those situations that I knew were going to drain me. And I think as parents, we face a lot of those situations, right? Picking our kids up at school. Sometimes the teacher is, this happened, this happened, this happened. And you're just like, you know, and so really being mindful of sometimes how long we're spending on thinking about a worry, where how can we can write it down, just get it out, and then come back to it later. Does that make sense? So really,
yeah. Well, I think a lot of this is going to resonate with our parents, because time and time again, what I hear, the world of ABA is changing a bit for a few reasons right now. And so unfortunately there's waiting lists, but when you do receive services, there's still some things that you have to deal with, you know, people in the world of ABA, there's high turnover and getting different jobs. And so a lot of our parents have decided to decrease hours or go without, or to maybe have somebody that's on their team that might not be an adequate fit, but it's at least somebody on their team that they can get some sort of help out of. And so I think those all-consuming thoughts really, really take over when you don't have this reframing opportunity.
Yeah. And I mean, it takes a lot of thought and time. I mean, working with all of the different scheduling, finding services, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. And then when you add in worries and then things like that, it definitely takes a lot of time. But that was one of the things that really helped me, is being mindful of those thoughts that were bringing me down, that were making me unhappy. So I didn't follow them as long, because we're going to have those. It's just, how long do we want to stay with them? And that made me on that shift to being a little bit happier because I wasn't spending. I mean, we're going to have those moments, but not as long. So that was one of the big things with that restoration, with helping that with the thoughts. And you know, the other component was that energy of doing things that give me energy, because a lot of times we don't do things that make us happy or give us energy, right? It's all right, well, you know, and we do, our kids have needs, we have to give them to, but you know, an hour a week to do something that fills our bucket, we need to do. We really, 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 really do as parents, because then we can become resentful. I hear that from parents so often, is frustration and resentment, those two emotions. And those emotions are not healthy for us and our kids feel our emotions. Our kids are so sensitive, and we know that. We know they're sensitive to sound. We know they're sensitive to the things around them. But we don't always remember how sensitive they are to our emotional energy. And if we can show up with that emotion of acceptance, of patience, of love, which is not easy when you are stressed and going and going and going and going and going. But this is what our kids need from us. And this is why it is so important to really reflect on, are we taking care of ourselves? And that's that self-care. And I know everyone's like, oh, self-care, you know, bubble bath or whatever. I mean, it's self-care is called parenting yourself, right? It's caring for yourself. You know, as parents, our parents cared for us to make sure we were taken care of, we were getting enough sleep, we were eating right. But now as we're adults, we forget that we kind of still need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And so we can take care of our kids. And that's another component of that, changing that paradigm, is making sure you are parenting yourself. You are making sure you're getting enough sleep. that the sleep component is huge for us and our kids.
Yeah, and just finding that time, even for me, I've been looking into grounding or earthing, just being able to go outside barefoot and walk around. You know, the little things that I do are just cold water exposure. You know, taking the last 15 to 30 seconds of my shower cold, and that varies for everybody if you're new to it. But like you said, just taking time every single day, those little things in the morning can make such a big difference and have lasting effects. When I just started walking around more often in my backyard barefoot, and one day I like tried to be angry. I don't know, but I was like, I want to be angry about this, but I just really couldn't. Whenever I started paying more attention to my self-care, it really does have such a profound change, and it'll be different for everybody. But I think that's why this is such a relevant topic and more parents need to hear about it. So what are some of the things that you have done, or the parents that you've done, that have done as far as self-care goes, in practical ways?
So I'll give three main things. So the first is, so when I start, the Empower Parent series is just a series to where we start restore, reconnect, reinvent. And so that restore piece, one of the big things, so it's not only what gives us energy, but what's taking away. And I know for myself, I would be on late at night on the computer, researching while my kids were asleep. And then I wouldn't go to bed till midnight or, you know, after, and then get up at 6. So I'm getting less than 6 hours of sleep. And I fell asleep while researching, trying to find, you know, different things for my kids. So I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't getting a restful sleep. I was worrying before I was going to sleep. So that's one of the first things, is making sure that you get at least 7 hours of sleep. 8's ideal if you can. I know that's not everyone's, but the way you think and show up the next day when you get enough sleep, once you actually get into that habit, it is amazing the difference in how I function when I get more than 7.5 hours. I mean, I am on that day versus when I get 6. But people don't know it can be different because they never try, because they're always getting that 6 hours or, you know, or so of sleep. There was a research study with it was, I think, Army sharpshooters, and they showed a graph. I love this graph, but they show it like with sleep deprivation. Like they had people with 8 hours of sleep, 7 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep, and it showed their accuracy over. And as they were getting sleep deprived, their accuracy went down for every hour they lost. And so it affects our brain. It affects how we can show up. So sleep, that's like number one. And for our kids too, like our brain needs that time to rest. We don't do it during the day. Let's make sure we have it at night. So that's one of the biggest things that I work with parents, is taking the electronics off, because that blue light, forget it, falling asleep, like stopping electronics for that hour, read, have a gratitude journal at night, and a problem. You can have these are my problems for the day, so I can let them go. I can write them down. And sometimes writing them out gives the acknowledgement to the problem, and then you can put it away and then do your gratitude and then go to sleep. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's a program called HeartMath, and it's about coherence, but it's heart and mind coherence. There's actually more as far as the receptors with information. We think everything comes from here, but there's actually more receptors that are sending messages from the heart up than the head down. So this right here, this heart, is so important. And so there's a program called HeartMath where we just hold our hand on our heart, and you just take some deep breaths and you just think of something that brings you joy. Because what we need to do is we need to recalibrate because we're so used to being in here, going, thinking of our problems. And we know how important gratitude is, right? And how that can shift us. So this just adds another element of bringing some energy to the heart, being mindful of the heart, breathing into the heart, and thinking of something that brings you joy. Because we want to be more in that state of joy instead of that state of go, regret, shame, which we're in a lot, frustration. These are all lower energies. So taking that moment to just stop, take a few breaths, think of something that brings you joy for a minute, can make a difference. So this is part of a HeartMath program that I integrate. But it is amazing. It's called coherence. And I can actually test. I have a machine where I clip it on, and you can actually test and see someone's coherence level. And when you're in a state of frustration, it looks like this. And when you're in a state of coherence, there's a nice, smooth. And so this is so important for heart health and to help calm that nervous system. So that's the second thing, is to really take time to just stop, take a breath, think of something that brings you joy. I used to do this before picking my kids up at school. Before I got out of that car, because I didn't know what I was going to be faced with when I opened that door. And if I took that 1 minute to just calm down, because we're right, go, we're never stopping. And this helps too with our kids with transitions. If you stop and take a couple deep breaths, so you're taking the breath to regulate the sympathetic nervous system as well, and bringing in joy and holding the heart, it gives the combination, especially in transitions with kids, really can make a difference. And a really fun, I'll just add this in, when I was working in Georgia way back 15 years ago, when I would work with some of the kiddos, when they would sit, and we'd always do some brushing and things before we went into the sensory gym, and I would just put my hand on their heart and just send a little love, and this one little boy, Bobby, whenever I'd see him, he's like, Miss Beth, hand, heart, and he'd grab my hand and he'd put it on here. And it got to the point, as soon as I actually picked him up in the waiting room to have him come back, he always, as soon as he saw me, he would grab my hand and put it here. He felt that. He wouldn't have wanted my hand on his heart if he didn't feel something.
Yeah, these are so intuitive, so intuitive. If we would just listen and know what their signals mean, what they're communicating. Oh.
And so doing this by putting the hand on the heart and having that pressure of safety, it's just so important. Why am I blank? Oh, the author, Temple Grandin. You know how she made that machine in college, that pressure? Guess what that thing was doing? Putting pressure right here over the heart. And all we have to do is use our hand. And it really does calm. And then you add in that feel-good feeling of thinking of something that brings you joy. It's so powerful. So I would say that would be the second thing is use that for us and for our kids. It's an easy, quick self-regulation and that breathing piece too. So it integrates all of that together. And doing it not as a okay, he's flipping out, so now we're going to do it. I'm upset, now I'm going to do it. But preventative, making it into a routine, because then you're helping that nervous system stay regulated, because you're adding that preventative 1-2 minute approach of just bringing back into the present moment with yourself. So yeah,
easy and practical, and that's what I love, and that's what I try to translate to the folks that we work with, whether it's professionals or parents. What's a practical strategy? And that only takes a minute out of the day to be able to do. You just have to know that those things exist and how to do them, and that just has such a profound effect. I love it.
And it's simple. And as a mom raising 2 kids who we've lived in 7 different countries in the last 15 years. Imagine moving with 2 kids on the spectrum.
Stress.
Yeah. And how many different schools? I mean, talk about stress. So if I can get out of it, you know, and that's the thing is I understand the practicality and craziness of our lives. And so everything that I do, I want to make it easy and doable. And these are the things, the big shifts that I've seen in myself and in others that are easy to implement. It's just remembering them and making them a habit. Those are the 2 things it really is. And the third thing that I just want to share, especially as parents, is that focusing more on the good than the bad. So that energy drain, right? So often we're so focused on what our kids aren't doing, what they should do, what we want them to do, or their problems and our worries, that we're not seeing all the good things that we're doing. And so if we step in their shoes, if we're with someone or our spouse, do we want them always to look at us and think what we're not doing? Or do we want them to like acknowledge what we are doing?
Yeah, and that's so profound because it happens every day.
Every day. Every day. So that's that awareness. Like, that's why we really go into like being aware of our thoughts, you know, where are they going? Because a lot of times, and when I shifted and really focused, now it's not like I'm ignoring the issues or the problems, but I'm just making sure I'm seeing the good things and acknowledging with them the good things. It makes me feel better because I'm like, wow, and I'm seeing the good things more. But then when they feel praised from what they did well, they're going to do it more because it feels good. Everyone loves to be praised, right? Everyone loves to be.
Behavioral techniques. Yes. Yeah. I could talk about that all day. I love it. Yes. It's reinforcing.
Yeah. And so that's one of the big things, the energy shift, because that's the whole energy. That's my big thing, right? That stress, but the energy that we're giving to ourselves and our kids and vice versa. So when we're focusing on that good, we're giving positive energy. And that's what we want more of between us and our kids. So yeah, that's the third thing.
Because what I was doing, and it's easy to lose sight of that when you're struggling to get your kids to speak or walk, just some basic things. And then you're going to play groups and you have all these other kids, or you go to a family reunion and say all the other kids are playing with one another. It's so easy to get caught up in what your child isn't doing. One of the things that I've had the families that I work with in early intervention do is just start keeping a basic journal of where your child started out and what we're working on, the positive things. That way, when you're having a rough day, you can actually go back and see the data, right? The evidence, the physical evidence of how far that they've come. Because similar to your story, my son being born premature, you know, all the struggles that we went through, like he was my quiet observer, getting him to talk and walk and really just struggling through like every mealtime. And so again, these strategies are so practical and so easy. So I love it. So if we have parents that are interested in learning more about what you're doing or getting more information from you, Elizabeth, how can they go about doing that? What's the best way to reach you?
Probably through my website. They can, The Empowered Parent.
Okay.
Yep, .com, just one E. So it's like the, and then, empowered. So it's not two E's, but theempoweredparent.com would probably be the best. Or the other email is the therapyintl.com. But that would probably be the best, because I have whatever, different programs. I do a monthly meetup where it's different topics. And so, live discussions. And then the next, we start the next rotation of the Empowered Parent series in September. So that will start. And that's just where the group of us go together and we start to do this together. We look at our triggers, we look at those things and together how we can start to make those shifts. Because it's not easy. We are so automatic in so many of the things that we do. So we take that deep dive into our awareness of kind of things that we can start changing so we can show up for our kids in that way we want to. But it's a journey.
I just think it's so powerful what you're doing, is because especially when you're the primary caregiver, whether you're the mom or the dad or the aunt, the uncle, the great grandparents, whoever it might be, sometimes you feel isolated even from your family, because you're doing the research and you're learning all these things, but maybe you don't have buy-in from the rest of the family and nobody else is really on your side. So to build that sense of community for folks is just really, truly empowering. So Elizabeth, I know that you're definitely going to get more people coming your way, because what you're doing is incredible. And yeah, we'll stay connected and continue to share your resources. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kristan, for all you're doing. You have amazing programs, and I'm so excited that you are out there doing amazing things. So thank you for letting me share my story and support your parents.
It's been incredible. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Take care.
Thank you.